The true disaster did not come from the shaking of the ground. Then, gravity began to pull all that matter back to the ground. The impact of the Yucatan Peninsula was only the opening shot. In the very first hours after the asteroid struck, the true disaster did not come from the shaking of the ground, but fell from the sky. When the massive 10-kilometer meteorite pierced the Earth's crust, the impact force created unprecedented thermal energy, instantly vaporizing billions of tons of solid rock and hurling them to the edge of the atmosphere. At that altitude, in the cold of space, the molten matter solidified into trillions of microscopic glass beads carrying immense heat. And then, gravity began to pull all that matter back to the ground. The sky was no longer the familiar deep blue. It turned into a glowing red dome like lava. The atmosphere was heated to the point that the thermal radiation reaching the ground hit hundreds of degrees Celsius. Vast tropical forests in North America, South America, and spreading globally, spontaneously burst into flames without a single direct spark touching them. Earth at this moment was no different from a giant, locked oven. Any creature that could not hide in deep water or huddle in underground caves was instantly roasted. Across the continents, the tragic roars of giant creatures engulfed in a vast sea of fire slowly faded away. But this extreme heat, this ferocious apocalyptic fire, would soon pass to make way for something far more cruel and persistent, a bone-chilling cold of doom. The heat gradually dissipated, leaving behind a scorched, blackened, and silent planet. Billowing smoke and dust from global forest fires, combined with millions of tons of sulfur dust hurled from the epicenter of the impact, condensed into a giant, thick black curtain enveloping the planet's entire atmosphere. The sun, the great engine providing energy and sustaining life on Earth for billions of years, seemed to have its switch turned off forever. The sky turned pitch black, not for a few days, not for a few weeks, but for many long years. A dark era began to swallow all things. With no sunlight reaching the ground, global temperatures plummeted. Temperatures plunged so sharply that they froze even the equatorial regions that once had the hottest and most humid climates. The forests that were once the lush, rich paradises of the dinosaurs were now buried under a layer of black snow and cruel ash. The world donned a gray cloak of death, cold, barren, and eerily silent. No longer were there birds singing to their flocks, nor insects chirping in the bushes, nor the sound of ground-shaking footsteps from prehistoric giants. All that remained was the freezing howl of winds filled with sharp dust, sweeping past dry, rotting tree trunks. In that endless and infinite darkness, the true tragedy of biology began to unfold. It was not the sudden death in the sea of fire of the first hours, but a persistent erosion and irreparable chain collapse of the entire ecosystem. Without sunlight, photosynthesis stopped completely. Plants, the most fundamental foundation of every food chain, lost their ability to survive and gradually rotted away. When the last green sprouts fell, giant plant-eating machines like Triceratops or Edmontosaurus no longer had a fuel supply. They were once proud living fortresses roaming the earth, but now thick armor and sharp horns could not resist the gnawing hunger eating away at their vitals. They wandered in despair through the darkness, chewing on scorched, barren logs before collapsing forever on desolate fields covered in ash. And as the giant herbivores fell, the final verdict was delivered to the kings of the old world. The greatest carnivorous dinosaurs, represented by the T-Rex, faced an irreversible death sentence. In this harsh and barren world, size was no longer a symbol of strength or brilliant dominance. Size was the fatal weakness, the cruelest curse of nature. A giant body weighing 6 or 7 tons required hundreds of kilograms of fresh meat every day just to maintain a heartbeat and body temperature. Now, their rippling muscles and jaws that could crush cars became completely useless when there was no longer any prey large enough to hunt. The last great T-Rexes wandered among rotting carcasses, their bodies emaciated, eyes clouded by hunger, when then they too collapsed, sharing the fate of the very prey they once hunted. In the darkness of the nuclear winter, Mother Nature drew a cold line. Every terrestrial creature weighing more than 25 kilograms was deprived of the right to live. The era of the giants was officially slammed shut. However, death is never the absolute end. At the thin boundary between life and death, there are always patient creatures that find a loophole in the rules of the game. Look at the swamplands and inland river networks, murky with ash. Why did the proud Tyrannosaurus Rex suffer extinction, while crocodiles, turtles, or amphibians, which seemed slower and less evolved, could peacefully survive the apocalypse? The origin of this miracle lies in their ultimate defensive biological mechanisms. These creatures possess an extraordinary survival ability, lowering their metabolic rate to almost zero. Crocodiles do not need a stable temperature environment to hunt continuously like warm-blooded species. When darkness fell and frost covered the lake surfaces, then they simply sank deep into the mud at the bottom of the rivers and entered a state of deep hibernation. Their biological engines were shut down, maintaining only the faintest pulses to cling to life. Furthermore, the food web in freshwater environments does not depend directly on living plants or sunlight. They rely on a different foundation, organic detritus. Dead plant matter, rotting tree trunks, and millions of dinosaur carcasses from the land were washed into the rivers, creating a closed ecosystem. To a pack of ancient crocodiles in hiding, the carcasses of dinosaurs falling into the water were not the remnants of a tragedy. It was a massive resource, a lavish feast sufficient to sustain them for months, even maintaining their lineage for years on end. The freshwater environment became a safe bunker, sheltering its inhabitants from the cruel punishment of the sky. The world has now changed hands. The strongest, the largest, and the fiercest have turned to dust. The great throne of Earth sits vacant. The chance of survival was given to those who were patient, those willing to scavenge, and those who knew how to hunker down before the wrath of nature. And somewhere in that eternal night, tiny mammalian ancestors were still burrowed deep underground, chewing on the last insects,